Brendan O'Friel joins us, the chairman of the Road Licensing Committee. And Brendan, it's with so many different hats on, but let's talk on this one today, because you've got this legislation that's in place now about the bigger vehicles on the Isle of Man. But you need to do a bit of PR on this because people aren't coming forward. But can I go back to the beginning? Why has this all come about?
It's come about because in the UK, for years and years, the goods vehicles have been regulated. They're under the traffic commissioners, and they've not just got to go through an annual MOT, but they've got to be maintained at a decent standard. The operators have got to have what's known as good repute, and there are some rules governing the operating centres, i.e. where all these big vehicles are parked up and operate from. So we've never had that in the Isle of Man. Now in 2001, when they passed the road transport licence, the legislation, the RTA, which set up the Road Transport Licensing Committee, the plan was they wouldn't just deal with taxis and buses, the public passenger vehicles, but they'd also deal with the heavy goods vehicles. But nobody ever got round to implementing it.
How different is the legislation on the Isle of Man? Because we don't have MOTs of cars, so are lorries any different? Do they get more inspections than anybody else?
Well, there's an annual inspection for all the big vehicles and all the public passenger vehicles up at the test centre.
Has that been a long time? Because this
has been going on. This has been going on for a while. The issue is not putting in tests. The issue now is making sure that in the period between the tests, and after all, there's only one a year, is that those vehicles are up to standard. And
we all remember, I think this wasn't what got sparked with this tyre falling off this vehicle and the tragedy that happened from that years ago. Didn't
Absolutely.
This all spark it
This
up?
is back in 2005, years and years ago. And it was round about just after Christmas, if I remember the accounts. And a wheel came off a lorry, and there were a bunch of young cyclists there, and one of those cyclists was killed. And a youngster of great promise. It was a terrible tragedy for the family, terrible tragedy for the island. And
so that was when things were looked at.
This actually, if the legislation had been brought in, that accident might not have happened, because when the whole thing went to court, as you would expect, the owner of the operation was fined quite a large sum of money because the vehicle had all sorts of faults, and the really telling thing was there were no maintenance records at all. So nobody actually knew when that vehicle had been properly inspected and how frequently it had been repaired. There were no records at all. So we needed to do something about it, and goodness, it's taken us to 2018 to get round to that.
But you've got the regs right, I mean, Tim will pass everything, but you're here today because things haven't quite got up to speed with most people, right?
What we wanted to do is to point out that the island has recently, the government's recently adopted a road transport safety strategy, and we've just heard, in fact, on the public health, there was an announcement through the public health things that there is a higher risk of people dying from road accidents in the island than there is across.
Yeah. But that's maybe TT figures, they reckon, right?
They may be TT figures, but that's what we've got to do is to try and improve that.
Yes.
And what I really wanted to draw everybody's attention to is we are actually working on this, and over the next year or so we should see a significant improvement with the goods vehicles, and that's part of the overall picture of what we need to get right if we're going to make the Isle of Man a safer place for everybody.
So what should people be doing today? You're talking about the people who own those lorries, the big vehicles.
That's right.
What do they need to make sure they've done?
Well, since the 1st of January we've been registering the operators. The operators of these sort of vehicles, they need to, if they haven't already done so, they need to contact the Road Transport Licensing Committee, go on our website, look at what needs to be done, put in an application, and if they do it before the end of the year, they have all the advantages of the transitional period where we take a number of things for granted. After the 1st of January, they'll have to go through a more rigorous process. But even more important, if they're operating a business at the moment, a haulage business, with vehicles that are covered by the legislation, and they're not actually gone through the process by the 1st of January 2020, they can't operate because they need to be registered, and they need their vehicles to be registered to continue operating.
There must be a website for more information.
Absolutely. Road Transport Licensing Committee, if you put that in, you'll find our website, and there's lots of information there. But the staff will also, if you ring up, you can't understand something, ring up and we'll try and explain as far as we can. What we did was, when the legislation was passed last year, members of the committee have been out talking to a number of the operators, because we wanted to find out what it looked like from the operator's point of view. And of course, we've been having operators coming in to register, we've been talking to them, and we've got, there are people who operate one vehicle, there are people who operate 50 or 100. So we've been gradually getting to know the people that
the bigger boys presumably are already... it's catching these smaller people, one-man
it's probably,
businesses and
we're not absolutely sure, because there's been no licensing previously. There's nothing to start with, so we don't know how many operators and how many vehicles we'll be dealing with. What we want to do is to make sure that everybody realises they need to get on with it now. And there's one particular group I'd like to talk about, and that is, of course, the people who've got these big vans, because they may think that some of the big vans, the ones with high roofs, ones with long wheelbases,
and
usually white, if they're over 3.5 tons, they come under the scheme. So they need to get in touch with us and get themselves registered as operators and get those vans properly dealt with.
Would that be on your driving licence? Is it a certain class of vehicle?
It's not so much class of vehicle, it's weight.
It is.
So it's over 3.5 tons. That's the key thing. The smaller vans, fine. There's no issue with that. But there are quite a lot of people who've got these high roof, long wheelbase things that you see around that are quite large, and they've got to come under the scheme.